it just happens that there is, in case of tokenization, there is almost always this kind of middle entity. So you have the asset, then you have somebody who issued the token potentially, which is a weak link, and then you have the ultimate investor. So eliminating this middle element in a trustless way is quite a challenge, and I've seen and I'm seeing a lot of experiments happening there, starting from, I don't know, audits by Big Four down to very creative ZK rollups, right? So this is number one. And then secondly, I just want to maybe say a word why the regulators around the world are a bit on the cautious side. So what we're dealing with when we're tokenizing, we're dealing with a lot of legacy systems. So let's say we're tokenizing a piece of real estate. There are little to none jurisdictions, certainly not in developed countries, where you can use a smart contract to transfer a property deed. So although you can easily use USDC, USDT, or many other virtual assets to settle the payment for the property, it's then kind of running into this roadblock where an actual human being needs to go and change the record in this legacy system where the title deed is transferred. For example, here in Dubai, I believe it's land registry. So figuring this out is a big piece, and here we really have to work together with the industry in order to enable this. And again, I invite you guys to explore this with ADGM, because we have the land register built into our jurisdiction, so we can make this happen. Yeah.
You're making an interesting point. So it's not just the law of asset tokenization, it's a law of which asset are you tokenizing. Yes, because every single vertical has its own practices, law, and I guess things are different because the physical nature of the underlying asset is different. So you have to treat it differently. How do you handle all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can take an extreme scenario of somebody tokenizing uranium, right? Obviously, you can create a closed-loop blockchain and KYC every wallet or every token holder that is on this particular blockchain. But this will ultimately run into the same bottleneck where you have to trust that the verifying party is doing their job. This middleman, and if this middleman fails, then what happens?
Oppenheimer.
Well,
interesting. You kind of anticipated my next question, which is what real-world assets? Wow, it's raining. Okay.
That's actually a good sign.
Everyone feel the mood? It's kind of raining. Okay. What assets lend themselves best to tokenization? So I just had a conversation with someone else saying that whenever it rains, it leaks. So guys, we're gonna pray together. Pray. Okay, and and if for some reason a little water comes down, don't panic. Just get another seat, even though I don't know where that will be. Okay, good luck. Good luck, everyone. Okay, so what assets lend themselves to tokenization? What's the biggest upside? What are the biggest hurdles? Like, kind of walk me through the zoology, if you like. I don't know if that's the right word, but go ahead.
Sure, I'll try to handle that or start with that. So I think you could probably divide it into a couple different classifications broadly, just to start, as those assets that are already securities and those that aren't securities, right? But really,
actually, let me stop because I want to dig on that. And a thought occurred to me when you were speaking. It's the law of securities is reasonably clear, but the nature of exchanges online is very different from the traditional exchanges. Are we running into even if there's not a problem on the initial securitization, are we now running into a downstream problem because of the nature of exchanges?
Possibly. A question I have is, if something isn't considered a security now, let's say wine or art, and it becomes tokenized, and it becomes traded on an exchange, does it then become a security?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Ask the rain god. No, but okay, I've dealt with this in the past. I did legal opinions on tokens, And the question is, does fractionalization somehow add a security characteristic to something? You know, maybe. Because, you know, if you're buying a bottle of wine, you're probably going to drink that bottle of wine, or you're going to sell it as a whole. It's very unsecurity-like. But when you tokenize it down to 1 million parts, and I feel like you want to comment on this, when you tokenize it down to 1 million parts, it becomes just financial in a sense.
It can, yeah. I think one of the big things about tokenization is that it's democratizing a much broader piece of investments than most people in their lives have usually been exposed to. So now, you know, what if perhaps in a few years anyone can invest in, you know, a famous painting, or anyone can buy a 100-year-old bottle of wine or a fancy car or something like that, right? So it's democratizing a level of investments, or investments to a level that's never been seen before. And I think that's something that will need to be addressed.
But are you showing a bias that I think a lot of people would agree with by calling it an investment? If I buy a millionth of a bottle of wine, and is it an investment? Is it automatically an investment and therefore probably a security? And I'm aware it's not always the same, but
sure. But it's that situation where it wasn't. Before it was tokenized, it wasn't considered a security.
yes.
Right. So post tokenization, it may be considered a security now that it can be traded on an exchange.
So easily, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's, you know.
Is there anything that shouldn't be tokenized? Or if they can't be tokenized, or there's no use case for it? Or is it the whole wide world?
I don't know if
This is not the easy panel. The easy panel was earlier. This is the hard panel.
I think mostly everything could be tokenized.
Okay.
So.
Interesting. Please.
Yeah, on the like, so we were asking like what are the use cases for tokenization, like in terms of asset
I'm
classes.
saying, I mean, basically, you know, it's easy to say that the whole world is tokenized, and we're talking about that.
Yeah.
But I think Dimitri's point was each thing is its own little special flower.
Yeah.
And so what lends itself to tokenization and what doesn't?
Yeah.
And what are the factors we should be looking at?
Yeah. So just to take a step back again on the potential of tokenization, you say everything is tokenizable. So think about that. So 900 trillions of assets in this world that can be tokenized. Okay, 900 trillion. 300 trillions of that are real estate. Okay, then 300 trillion are bonds. So that's the biggest one with real estate. So you have 300, and then 120 is equity, and 120 is cash, and the rest is gold, art, bottle of wines. And so when you look at that, which one have the biggest potential? Today it's all about bonds, so definitely it's all about bonds. We talk about, you said like that it's easier to tokenize bonds. Euroclear just did a great use case with the World Bank tokenizing bonds, and I love what they did because they tokenize bond like as an end user, like as a market maker or trader, you don't even realize that that bond has been tokenized, and the benefit of that was to remove frictions. Because on the primary issuance of bonds, you need to talk to lawyers, you need to talk to different counterparties, and the benefit of the blockchain to orchestrate, to make those counterparties all talk together more easily. So yeah, bonds, definitely, right now it's all about bonds and definitely cash, so stable coins. So that's why also Ripple is launching a USD stable coin. So today it's that, and I love also the private debt use case, but that's because of the difficulty for retail to have access to private debt. But in a nutshell, today it's all about bonds and cash. And definitely for cash, I was in TradFi before, and you all know like ability to transfer cash, especially living in Dubai, in and out can be a bit difficult. So the promise of stablecoin being able to remove those friction is a huge tokenization benefit. Yeah.
Please.
So I agree, and I would add to that, and I would say anecdotally we're seeing interest in tokenization at kind of two ends of the liquidity spectrum. On one end, we're seeing a lot of interest in tokenization of cash and cash equivalents. So tokenized stablecoins, tokenized deposit, or tokenized stablecoins, tokenized deposits, wholesale CBDCs, yield-bearing stablecoins, and then money market funds for all the reasons that we talked about earlier. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing a lot of interest in the tokenization of alts, alternative assets, so real estate, infrastructure, private equity, and private credit. And just my personal view is that I think private credit is kind of where you see the blockchain-based benefits sooner rather than later. But the impetus among asset managers in that space is really the idea of by putting on chain not just the end fund representation, but as much as you can of the end-to-end asset management lifecycle. So onboarding, capital calls, subscriptions, redemptions, fund disbursements, fund admin, NAV, all that stuff. That's where you realize the efficiencies and cost savings that make lower investment minimums economically viable for asset issuers. So,
which goes to her point a while back, which is, you're saying that it's hard to access certain markets unless you have a certain amount of capital. It's not worth it for that provider of that service. But you're arguing, if I understand correctly, the threshold gets dropped with tokenization.
Yeah, so it's not the tokenization that makes it more accessible or liquid. It's that the efficiencies make lower investment minimums economically viable for GPs to take on a greater number of LPs, and that is ultimately the democratization that we talk about.
Interesting. Now, just to follow up on something you said, at the extremes, we're seeing tokenization, or at least an interest in it, like when it's really either really easy or when it's really hard. What do you attribute it? Why the dead middle?
So, I mean, the dead middle more so would be like public equities and fixed income, and I think that those things eventually will be tokenized, but I think in terms of like where you can see the relative more immediate benefits and where potentially you're able to facilitate this kind of more readily, I think it's in those two extremes. But I think eventually like tokenization will kind of do to assets what ETFs did to mutual funds. Like it's just another wrapper, but it took ETFs like over 20 years to really garner trillions in AUM. So I think it's a process, especially when you're talking about integrating legacy infrastructure. But over time, I think it'll encompass public securities too.
I think things keep on moving faster, right? It's a law of accelerating returns. I don't think it's going to take 20 years, but point taken, please.
Yeah. Again, I think my fellow co-panelists covered.
Just because you're at the end, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. I want full answers in your 2 minutes and 53 seconds.
Okay. I think you can tokenize pretty much anything, just like you can put a bet on pretty much any activity. So if there is a kid throwing a rock against a tree in Puerto Rico, you can bet on it. Just like that, you can tokenize pretty much anything in this world. Should you? That's another question, and I think this is where we're getting into maybe some moral aspects, such as should we tokenize human life? Probably not. Yeah, but technology is there.
Sorry, I keep on seeing though. People are talking about tokenizing their future earnings to allow them to get educated today. That conversation keeps on popping up somehow, and of course, the national metaphor in our minds is slavery, but maybe it's also an enabler. Also, I think it's a little tricky.
Yeah, I don't want to go into this conversation, but
okay.
Tokenizing human life is probably somewhere where we should draw the line,
Okay.
As in not future earnings, but actual, because there is an aspect in such mechanism as token burning, for example. What do you do then?
Okay, that got dark. So you're not off the hook. So in terms of regulating and in terms of approaching it, what is a regulatory priority and what is like second? It sounds like securities is the regulatory priority?
It's a good question. So I mean, I can speak for all regulators in the world, but I think in ADGM specifically, we have covered this aspect quite extensively. And yes, we have started with the securities and something coming from TradFi, but now it became almost boring. So we are focusing on much more exotic asset classes and abilities of this of tokenization to create new blends of businesses, ranging from TradFi down to tokenization of carbon credits, to tokenization of time of people, which is similar to the example that you've given. But I think we have figured out the securitization in our jurisdiction specifically. We have moved on to more exciting things.
Let me just say that one in our last 30 seconds. You have a very powerful jurisdiction, but you have a micro jurisdiction, and the blockchain is inherently global, if not universal. Is there sort of a knitting together of jurisdictions that's happening so these things can be passported and moved around? What do you see the future there?
Yeah, I think FATF is doing performing this function and leading the regulators to passporting requirements and so on. But again, just throwing back on the jurisdiction. So ADGM is a home for both Circle and Paxos in MENA region. So just as a fact check, maybe lean on this and invest some time read into the regulation. I think we have figured this out quite well.
Fascinating. Okay, big round of applause, please, for our post-lunch panel that kept it live. Well done. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.